Take it off! Don't worry, Buster. It's coming off. So a couple months ago, I made a video all about the audience and what to expect at a burlesque show. And you can find that video right here for anyone who's brand new to burlesque and might want to prepare yourselves. Today, I'm expanding a little bit more on that video. I'm going to be making 3 videos. This is the very first one of the 3. I'm all talking about the unwritten rules of burlesque. And today we're going to be expanding a little bit more on the audience's role in having that good time. Unwritten rules for the audience. Let's go. A lot of these guidelines that I'm going to be saying today is going to actually be really dependent on the audience or the show or the atmosphere. So big thing I'm probably going to remind you at the end as well is to just read the room and really pay attention to what's going on and pay attention to what's the atmosphere for that show. Don't be afraid to cheer and get really into it and go woo, and also don't be afraid to be really quiet and just take things in if it's a lot to process. We see a lot of people who might cheer because they're used to cheering, but what if it's a sad act or a really personal, vulnerable act? It can be really awkward to cheer for those. Just because someone's taking clothes off on stage doesn't necessarily mean you have to cheer. Even if you cheer at the very end because you were really moved by it, that is fantastic. We all have our own ways of processing acts and how taking it in, and even with burlesque, it can be a lot to process. What does it even mean to have body positivity or neutrality, or what does it look like? What if I'm somebody who's really at the beginning of my journey with accepting my own body, or I'm not ready for that? There's still so much stigma around nudity and especially femme presenting bodies that I might have my own weird feelings at shows of people celebrating their bodies, and how do I do that? Or maybe I'm not ready and I'm having all these ishy gushy feelings, which can come up and is completely normal. I often say that it takes practice to be an audience member because of these 3 things. Not only practice in how do you kind of go with the flow with what everyone else is doing, but how do you even process your own feelings as they come up with burlesque, especially if we're seeing more personal acts as well. And so just don't be afraid to really be honest and authentic with your reactions. Don't be afraid to even step away if you need to, or go outside for a little bit of a break. We don't want to cause bad feelings within our audiences, and we don't want you to be hurt at the end of the day, and we don't want you to have your own feelings come up and maybe impact the other audience members as well. Most shows, when they talk about housekeeping, it's going to be pretty standard with burlesque does not equal consent. If you see a performer on stage, yeah, you're allowed to cheer, you're allowed to woo or yay or whatever you do, but it's not consent to dehumanize performers, but anything that's really an objectifying kind of tone, to be really conscious of that. A lot of performers will mingle during the show or after the show or during intermission, or even if they have an act where they go into the audience. Quite often a lot of us might go into the audience during an act and really mingle and tease specific audience members, or really tantalize them. It depends on the performer, it depends on the show, it depends on the people in the audience. Quite often there's a huge aspect of consent with that as well. Consent goes 2 ways. So as a performer, it's my responsibility to really pay attention to audience members when I'm doing stuff like that, and if I'm performing in the audience, to make sure, does this person seem really into it, really comfortable? And I'll make eye contact with them. I might even say, is something okay? And if they are enthusiastic in nodding their head, or you can see them open body language, I might be really encouraged to go to that person. But if they're a little bit quieter, maybe looking down, a little bit more shy, I might not go to them. That goes with an audience as well, is if they're walking around mingling with other audience members, sure, you can say hi. Usually you can say hi, congratulate them on their act, or say that you enjoyed their act, but make sure if you're taking photos that you're always asking if it's okay. Burlesque is still a very personal thing for a lot of us, and we're technically working when we're performing and when we're on shows. And also, don't be sad or disappointed if a performer says no. Just because you ask for consent doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it, and especially if it's a performer who might have been talking to a lot of people that day, a lot of audience members might have come up to them, maybe they just don't like giving hugs, especially now with things being had the way they are. That goes with on stage as well. A lot of huge things we see with housekeeping quite often is things like Don't take photos, don't take videos. Often shows will have their own professional videographers or photographers, and they'll be the only people allowed to take photos. There are the few situations I know where certain shows do allow their public audience members to take photos, but they will usually publicly say that at Housekeeping as well. If you are somebody who might be a partner or a friend of one of the performers, and maybe they ask you to take a photo or video for them for that show, this is more the performer's responsibility, but make sure that you actually have clearance with the producer, and don't just do it because somebody said you did, because it's a lot for producers to say no and then just suddenly see people they might not know were going to be filming or might not know had permission from that performer. As a performer, if for those performers who have their friends in the audience, make sure you pass it by the producer first. And as an audience, make sure you know what the venue protocols are. The venue, the shows. Do you have to stay at your table? Do you have to wear a mask? Do you have bar service? Do you have to walk up to the bar if you want to get a drink or food? Or do they have servers that come to you? And just make sure that you really respect any protocols that have been put forth by the venue and the show owners. There's, again, a lot to manage. A lot of that as well includes do not go backstage ever if you're not in the show. Even if you're a partner or a friend, a lot of producers have a rule where no one's allowed backstage unless they are either a performer, the MC, or they've been pre-approved by the producer. If you know a performer and you're going backstage to help them pack up to go home, make sure you ask that performer that everything's clear and make sure they have everything good to go. The backstage area is a really personal space. Shockingly enough, people are often naked backstage. It's a place where we can get ready for the show mentally, emotionally, prepare ourselves to perform on stage, and it's really not okay to have random people just step back there. Again, if a producer is told beforehand and they did approve a guest backstage, then they can let all the performers know beforehand. It's more so, it's not as much about people who are just going as an audience member, but it's about people who are in the audience who know performers, when we tend to see that, or even other performers who just are not in that particular show to not go backstage unless, again, you've been pre-approved. Another really big one as well is don't heckle the MC. We do see burlesque and drag are really fun shows, and there's that huge element of witty banter back and forth or connection and intimacy between the audience and the MC, which is phenomenal, and that's what makes it incredibly unique and why so many people love to go back over and over and over again. There is a very fine line between having fun and witty banter and heckling the MC. As soon as you start to talk back and forth with an MC publicly in front of everybody, and you start to take the show away from the MC and what's going on, then that's when it starts to be a little bit too much. People might get tired. People might be like, okay, I want to see the show. Even if you're another burlesque performer, if you're a partner, or if you're a regular audience member that we all know, keep in mind how much attention you're taking away and how much you're giving, because there are certain times when it is fun to just say like, I knew that, or this is the date of this show if an MC can't remember, or throw something out there. Again, just keep in mind with how much time you're taking up with those kinds of comments. And with that as well is when you're being conscious of yourself, really, again, pay attention to the atmosphere around you. Is this an all BIPOC show? Is this a space for all femmes or all transgender performers? Any marginalized community? And am I there as an ally, or am I there as part of that community? Quite often, this is something that we see all the time, quite often where allies will be at shows, and that's great, and we love seeing you supporting us, but really making sure that you're not taking away from that energy and making it about you, and really just being there to listen and appreciate and celebrate, or whatever the theme is or the atmosphere is with that show. Most of the time my shows are all BIPOC shows, but we do allow the audience to be people from any background, whether they're a person of color or not, and so we do give that speech at the beginning to say that this space is for people of color to celebrate, to be safe, to take care of yourselves, to do whatever we need to do just to create representation and safety and celebration, and as somebody who's not a person of color, to just be mindful of your privilege and know that you're here as a guest, and to really we want you to celebrate with us, and we want you to have a good time, and we want you to listen when there's politics on stage, but also don't take that away and then feel guilty and have emotional label put on the people of color. Or even if the stage is for performers of color, or if we have audience participation that's meant for that, as somebody who's not a person of color, it might be inappropriate, depending on the show, to go on stage and to be like, yeah, look at me supporting, yeah, look at me, or at a gay bar, yeah, look at me, a straight person celebrating a bachelorette party is not so much about you not having a good time, but it can really jeopardize the safety and how comfortable and safe the individuals that space is intended for can feel. Trust me, there's a lot that I've seen, there's a lot of stories I've heard about. It's just really important to be aware, and there's gonna be times when a lot of the guidelines I said are exactly that. They're guidelines. 9 times out of 10 probably it's going to be similar. It's going to depend on the show. There's a lot of shows where they do encourage it as a party atmosphere, and they're like, we want you to have fun. We want you to dance on that floor while you're going. We want you to just mingle, talk, have a good time. You're at the club, enjoy the show. There's going to be shows when maybe you do want to be conscious of your alcohol limit and have that really impact how you behave or how you react to different things in that show. And there's going to be shows where they're going to be like, nope, we don't care. We get bar sales, so drink as you want, or it's a party, or it's a good time, it is a celebration. Being able to have that perception of what's going on around you is really great, and a lot of the times you can really read the room pretty easily or pretty quickly, especially if you've gone to a few burlesque shows and learning what is the atmosphere, what is the culture in this particular production or venue that I should be aware of. And with that, those are some of the general tips I have for audience members. If you have any questions, comments, leave them down below. Burlesque is one of those things where we have a lot of unwritten rules. You don't know unless you know, or unless you've been told about something, or unless maybe you made a mistake and someone told you not to do that. I would love to see if you are a performer or a regular audience member, what are some etiquette or unwritten rules that people should be aware of when they're an audience member in burlesque. Leave them down below, and otherwise I really look forward to seeing you next time. Bye!